Hello and welcome to a VSA Capital video. I'm Ollie O'Donnell and today we'll be looking at Midnight Sun Mining, TSXV listed copper exploration company with projects in Zambia. I'm pleased to be joined by Adrian O'Brien, Director of Midnight Sun. Adrian, thank you very much for joining me today.
Excellent. Thanks, Ollie. I appreciate it too, and looking forward to talking about the project with you.
Yeah, this is a really exciting company and everyone wants to find copper in the mining space. I don't think we need to go through the long-term narrative as that is so well understood around electrification, AI, data centers. But as soon as you get out of the majors, looking for pure copper exposure on the stock market does get quite tricky. So perhaps you can give us a brief overview of Midnight Sun before we get into the detail on Zambia, the projects, your dual strategy, and the recent rounds of investment.
Sure. For sure. I mean, to understand Zambia in particular, Zambia it's actually the second top world jurisdiction as far as copper exploration and development and copper mining. Their output is massive. If you look at Zambia from a country perspective, 75% of their export earnings are copper. Really friendly jurisdiction. They have a proper mining act in place, democratically elected government. They are absolutely mining centric. And you see, there's a reason why Rio Tinto, First Quantum, Barrick, Anglo American, every big mining player in copper right now is focused on Zambia. And of course, KoBold, who we're partnered with. Everybody is focused on Zambia right now, and for good reason. And there's huge deposits there. When you look at the Domes region where we're working, the average size of a deposit is around 1 billion tons. So it is a place that you can have a globally impactful discovery, and that's a rare thing.
The geological prospectivity is really well understood, but about even as recently as 2 years ago, Zambia was right at the bottom of the mining attractiveness index on the Fraser Institute. Whereas this year in Dumbwa, there was definitely a feeling that things were back on the up and people are looking at the country again for investment. So what has happened over the last couple of years?
Oh, it's really simple. There was a change in government. So when you look at Zambia itself, I mean, you have decades of production at First Quantum's Kansanshi mine next door to us, Barrick's Lumwana mine, First Quantum Sentinel mine. So it's not as though Zambia wasn't an area that had large copper production and a lot going on, but there was a change in taxation that happened under the old government. And of course, that lowered its ranking in the index. There was very quickly a change in government and a complete reversal of that situation. And the president of Zambia that's in now is phenomenal. They really are making this a top tier jurisdiction to work in. And I think the sentiment is very clear that Zambia is absolutely in the top couple of places in the world now to look for copper. And from a geological perspective, there is nowhere better.
Excellent. And with the structure of your mining licenses, what is the typical deal? Is it a use it or lose it? Do you have a minimum spend? What is the structure in Zambia look?
So basically, Zambia is really simple. Your mining licenses from an exploration perspective are 9 years. There is requirements as far as spend and that type of thing. And they do have a use it or lose it rule. So, very simple. Unless you go into production, it's a 9-year license for exploration. And at the point that you go into production, it becomes a 25-year license. And in the meantime, you have to shed a certain percentage of your property if you're not working. So essentially what they're trying to do, and I don't necessarily disagree with this, they have a use it or lose it rule where you basically are inspired to make sure that you're actively working, actively exploring, actively developing your projects, and not just sitting on property. And where that really affects people is if you look at an area like the Domes region of Zambia that is completely dominated by majors, it's very easy for those groups to go in, acquire giant swaths of land, and it becomes a real estate play. Who owns what? Holding on to things for years and years and years. And that law is put in place to prevent that from happening and make sure that people are moving projects forward and that there's an aggressive amount of exploration happening. And so if you're doing lots of work, it's not a problem at all.
Okay. And you've got a concentrated set of license areas all in this Domes region. So perhaps you can give us a bit of an overview and around the neurology and the regional geology.
Absolutely, yeah. So basically The Domes region. So if you look at Zambia from a copper production and large deposit perspective, there's the Zambia-Congo Copper Belt, the traditional Zambia-Congo Copper Belt that runs northwest, southeast. And there's dozens of big deposits and a number of big operating mines in that belt. It's very, very well known. But there's another area, and that area is called the Domes region. The Domes region runs east to west, and it straddles the Zambia-Congo border. So 2 of the biggest deposits are inside the Congo, and the rest of those are inside Zambia. And the difference being in Zambia, very mining friendly, safe jurisdiction, easy to work. And the Zambian government, under the way that these are structured, they allow you to keep a large percentage of your license. In the Congo, you basically have to give up 50% of your license or something like that to the Congo government. And DRC is tough. There's no way around it. So if you look at that Domes region, it is completely dominated by majors. There's virtually no juniors in the belt, or the ones that are very, very small property packages working here and there. And going back 12 years, we managed to acquire a property that encompasses over 500 square kilometers. So it's very, very large. It's broken up in 4 pieces. Each of those pieces is maybe not quite equal in size, but they're all around 150 to 200 square kilometers. And each of those properties is a target for one of these billion-ton transformative deposits. And so if you look at the area around us, you have furthest west, about 100 kilometers, First Quantum Sentinel mine. That's 1 billion tons at 0.51% copper. A little bit further to the east, between us and First Quantum Sentinel mine, is Barrick's Lumwana mine. And to understand what Barrick is doing there, Barrick is moving from being one of the world's largest, or the world's largest gold producer, to wanting to become one of the world's largest copper producers. This is ground zero. So Barrick's Lumwana mine is absolutely the epicenter of what they're doing. And that deposit's 1 billion at around 0.55% copper. So very large deposit. And you're seeing a theme here. The deposits in the belt, the deposits in the Domes region, average around 1 billion tons. So if you find something, it's multi-generational. These are transformative deposits that will have a global impact. They're that big of a situation. They're fairly shallow. They're SEDEX mineralization. So they're the type of deposit that can be put into production much more quickly. They don't come with the type of ridiculously large capex that large underground copper deposits do. So you have that ability to move things forward more quickly. But moving back to the location, our property is basically surrounded by the 4 biggest copper deposits in Zambia. So again, First Quantum Sentinel mine to the west. Right beside us on the west side is Barrick's Lumwana mine. On the east side of us, directly adjacent to our property, is First Quantum's Kansanshi mine. And Kansanshi is Africa's largest copper producer. So that's 1 billion tons at 0.66% copper. And we're working with First Quantum, and I'm sure you and I will dig into that in a bit more detail. But so that's right beside us. And then above us, you have Tenke. And Tenke is a deposit that's inside the DRC. And it was purchased by China Molybdenum a few years ago. So the Tenke deposit's around 150 million tons at, let's call it, less than 2% or around 2%, but which is very large and very high grade. And then to the west of that, you have Ivanhoe's Kamoa-Kakula. And Kamoa is, without any question, the biggest, baddest copper deposit around now. It's 1.3 billion tons at, what are they up to? 1.4 billion tons at 3% roughly. So it is absolutely massive and growing. So that's a very, very big asset, but it is inside the DRC border, which means Ivanhoe had to give up a very significant percentage of that. And it makes life a lot more difficult. So, they own, if I'm not mistaken, around 36% of the deposit. Where we're working, we own 100% of everything. And going forward, the percentage that the Zambian government will own, taxation, it's all very reasonable, in line with what you would see in somewhere like North America. So it's not, it's a very, very good place to work. And we're lucky to be inside the border. But we are surrounded by all of the biggest copper deposits in Zambia and in the Domes region. And we're the only junior that's in that position. And certainly from a closology perspective, it literally doesn't get any better. And we have the right geology. So we have all the same geology as those operating mines. We're just underexplored. We have not systematically drilled this property off. And that's what we're setting out to do now.
Okay. So moving on to Dumbwa, the project that you got strategic investment into first a few months ago. Who's the partner on that project, and why have they come in, and how much work had you done on the license before the partner came in?
Well, I'll answer that part first. So if you look at our property, we've been there for 12 years. Okay, so we've been there for a very long time. We've done a lot of work. We've done geophysics across our property. We've done geochem. We've sampled. We've drilled. And we actually have drill discoveries on every part of our property. So Kaziba, which is up to the northwest, Me Too down to the southwest, Crunch on the southwest side, and of course, Dumbwa, where we're working. We've done a tremendous amount of work. So we already know there's mineralization there, and there's some really compelling features at Dumbwa that led to KoBold coming into the story. So the group we're working with is KoBold Metals. KoBold is fairly new. They're a new player, getting a lot of attention, largely because of the investors that they have behind them. So Bill Gates is an investor in KoBold, and he has a fund called the Breakthrough Energy Ventures Fund. That includes Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, Richard Branson. It's a who's who of Silicon Valley investors. And by way of the Breakthrough Energy Ventures Fund, they're invested in KoBold. They also have T. Rowe Price, Anderson Horowitz, the Canadian Pension Plan. I mean, they have the who's who of investors. And I think the last round they raised was around $300 million. So they've done an incredible amount of financing. But I think what you really have to look at with KoBold is the team they've built. They have something like 200 different geoscientists working on staff. They have 65 PhD geos working on copper projects. They have literally the absolute best team you could ever find with a junior or a major. It's absolutely incredible. And how they came to the fold was really that our area at Dumbwa is reasonably well known in the region. There is a very large soil anomaly on that property. And it's important to understand that every deposit in the domes region is driven by a basement dome. So these are big geological structures that sit underneath where the mines are, and they basically control where these deposits are formed. And so if you look at each of the areas, whether it's Barrick's Lumwana mine or First Quantum Sentinel mine or Kansanshi, there's a dome underneath each of those. What's unique about our property, though, is that we have 3 or 4 domes. So we have multiple domes, and that drives multiple systems. So there's actually more than one big system on our property that we're working on. And at Dumbwa in particular, what we saw was a soil anomaly. And of course, we did a ton of soil sampling. And we outlined a soil anomaly that was over 20 kilometers long, which is unheard of. I mean, it's absolutely amazing. But not just was there this large soil anomaly. That large soil anomaly gets up to 0.73% copper. Now, at first blush, maybe that doesn't sound super impressive. Somebody might not have context and go, well, 0.73, I mean, it's not even 1%. What is that? If you look at the area, the average grade at the mines is 0.59%. So we're actually getting ore grade copper in soil at surface, which is, it's the largest soil anomaly on record in Zambia. I mean, it really is something that you look at and go, wow, that is something that you need to pay attention to, right? Then we have a little bit of outcrop, and it's the only part of our property that any kind of bedrock outcrops. And where it does, it's massive bornite. It's the stuff you're looking for when you're trying to drill one of these deposits. So that's 2 big things that tell you something is going on there. Number 3, there are vegetation kill zones along that entire area. And to understand, Zambia is very green. There's a lot of agriculture. And for whatever reason, and we know what the reason is, nothing can grow on that soil anomaly in certain parts of it. And so there's only 2 places in the Domes region that they've seen that occurrence. And it's Tenke, which I mentioned is about 1.5 million tons at, what is it? So 120 million tons at around 1.5 or 2 or somewhere in that range. So Tenke and Kamoa-Kakula, which of course is 1.4 billion at 3%. So the 2 highest grade deposits in the whole Domes region have that kill zone, vegetation kill zone occurrence, and we see it at Dumbwa. So that's something that tells you there's a big sulfide system feeding that. There's something there that's preventing things from growing. And then to sort of throw the icing on the cake, that anomaly extends beyond our southern boundary. And where it extends beyond our southern boundary, that property is owned by a major mining company. And they drilled the southern tip of that anomaly about 1.5 years ago and made a major discovery. And so that just threw the whole thing into play. Everybody kind of came to the table, and we had a lot of groups vying for the property, for a deal. But KoBold is the group we went with.
Okay. And so what are the terms of their earn-in, and with that investment, what are you going to be able to do over the next 12 months?
Yeah, so it's really straightforward. It's a straight earn-in to 75% of Dumbwa. So we've carved up the property, and as I keep mentioning, we've got 4 separate individual targets. And so we basically took those and said, okay, it's 4 individual targets, 4 individual properties. We're going to deal with them independently. So Dumbwa is the first one out of the gate. And the deal we have with KoBold is a straight earn-in to 75% of just Dumbwa. We retain 100% of everything else. And they have to spend $15 million in exploration, and they have to make cash payments to us of $500,000 over the next 4.5 years. And that'll get them to that 75% mark. And the beauty is we've done all the geophysics and geochem already. So they're basically going to do almost entirely drilling. And that number was not arrived at by luck or chance. Why we're doing $15 million is if you look at the deposits in the region, it basically took around 40 to 50,000 meters of drilling to get to critical mass, to show that there was a billion-ton deposit there. And so we designed this that over the next 4 years, they'll do enough drilling to hit that 40 to 50,000 mark in terms of overall meters and get us an answer as to whether or not this is a billion-ton dome system copper deposit.
I mean, that is incredible drilling value when you compare it to your other peers in South America, drilling at altitude over much greater distances. I mean, absolutely. A huge advantage for the project.
Yeah, and being able to cut to the chase, right? We don't have to spend years doing preliminary work. It's done. That part's behind us. This is all about putting a systematic drill program in place. And we already know we have discoveries at Dumbwa. We have discovery holes there that are significant, big intercepts at depth. So we know there's mineralization there. KoBold has developed a model, and they believe that this is a Lumwana analog. So really, if you look at the Lumwana mine next door, they're stacked SEDEX horizons. They believe that we have the same kind of thing going on at Dumbwa. So they have a model and they have a plan, and basically it's all drilling and it's going to cut to the chase. Systematic, very direct, very aggressive. And let's get in there and see if this thing is a billion-ton deposit.
Excellent. And then on the other 3 targets that you still have 100% ownership of, quite a different strategy, but also fully funded. You did incredibly well to raise $10 million in a very oversubscribed deal a month or so ago. So what is the strategy on the remaining license areas?
So there's actually 2 different strategies. So you kind of have to think of them as each having double potential. So they have 2 potentials. They have oxide copper, which is near surface mineralization, and then they have SEDEX copper potential. So that's the chance to host one of these billion-ton deposits. So Kaziba, northwest, Crunch, which is further down to the south, and then Me Too, which is down in the southwest corner of our property, each have the potential to host one of these billion-ton deposits. But they also have oxide mineralization, which is, let's call it the first 50 to 60 meters of stratigraphy, from surface down to 50 or 60 meters depth. They have mineralization that is very high grade in some cases, particularly at Kaziba. And that material is literally sitting at surface. It's stuff that you can scoop up with an excavator. So it's easy to work with and deal with and find. But it's not vast quantities. We don't expect there to be a billion tons of oxide material. And in a case like ours, we wouldn't necessarily look at that and say, well, this is something we're going to build a standalone mine and we're going to go out and heap leach copper oxides. It just doesn't make sense from an economic standpoint. But there's a very unique situation that is based purely on our proximity to First Quantum's Kansanshi mine. And that is, Kansanshi produces about 1.2 million tons of sulfuric acid a year as a byproduct. So they have 3 circuits, one of which is an SXEW oxide circuit. Their predominant circuit is a sulfide circuit. And of course, sulfides are what they are predominantly mining. But they have a smelter there, and that smelter is probably one of the most efficient smelters on the planet. And that byproduct is about 1.2 million tons of sulfuric acid. And so in order to get rid of the sulfuric acid, which is an environmental liability, they've used oxide copper that they also had at Kansanshi, keeping in mind it's only about 6 kilometers away from us and very similar in terms of mineralization and that type of thing. They basically use their oxide copper to neutralize the acid. So they heap leach the copper oxide. That gets rid of the acid, so environmental liability is gone. But also at any heap leach operation, your biggest expense is acid. So now they're heap leaching copper oxides and unlocking the copper that's in the oxides. So they ended up developing a second revenue stream, and that revenue stream for them produces between $200 and $400 million a year, which is incredible. But they have now exhausted their oxide supply. They are totally depleted, and they need another source. And the only other source in the area is Midnight Sun's property. And so we have oxides at Kaziba and at Me2, and together we're going to work on, we're calling it a cooperative exploration plan, but essentially they're combining forces with us here to go out and define as big a resource as we can find at each of those properties and get that material going to Kansanshi as quickly as possible.
So the work programs over the next 12 months or so, will that include, presumably it'll include a lot of drilling for the oxides? Will you be able to test some of the deeper targets as well? And will you have anything left over for met test work? Because that's obviously going to be key to see whether it does work in the plant.
It does. So basically how it's going to work under this cooperative exploration plan is that First Quantum, rather than, let's say, making an investment in Midnight Sun or something like that, First Quantum is actually going to contribute a geological team. They're going to contribute to our drill plan. So we're going to do the drilling, but they're going to help us guide where we should do it, how we should do it, because they know what they need. They're going to carry out all the assaying at Kansanshi. They're going to do the met testing at Kansanshi. So metallurgical testing will be done on an ongoing basis as we drill. And importantly, because this is near surface and because of the type of mineralization it is, we can do all the drilling with reverse circulation. So that's very cheap and very quick and very easy. So for example, at Kaziba, we're going to drill about 150 holes at a max depth of maybe 50 or 60 meters. And that'll give us an idea of how big, how much of a resource we can put together that works, that we can send to Kansanshi. And that's going to be very quick. It'll only take maybe 4 months, 5 months to get that done. And then you have to enter the permitting process, changing it from from an exploration thing to a mining license. Then you also have to go forward with pit planning and mine planning and figuring it out. But keeping in mind that mining that means bringing an excavator in, scooping the material up at surface, loading it in a dump truck of some kind and moving it to the Kansanshi mine, which is, again, 6 kilometers away. And we're located right on their haul road. So this is super easy. There's about a 1.5 kilometer stretch that we need to connect with a small spur, and that's about it. So it's very, very quick and very easy to do. But to your question about whether we'll explore for the bigger, deeper sulfide targets, I think the way to look at it is this. We're going to retain all the potential on those properties for a bigger, deeper sulfide target down below. And we will eventually explore those properties with the sulfide target in mind. But we're looking at a situation here that could produce really significant near-term cash flow for Midnight Sun, which means going forward, we would not need to dilute any further. We don't need to raise any more money. We can use any cash flow we get from that operation and put that straight into exploration on those bigger targets on each of those properties. And the other thing is that when we do this drilling, of course, there will be all kinds of geological information that we'll gain that will lend itself to the bigger targets down below. So we are gaining information and insight all the way along at every step.
So what are the next catalysts that investors should be looking for over the next few months?
Well, I think the big ones are starting drilling. So realistically, we're making some personnel additions now, rounding out our team, beefing up our bench strength. And we believe that's super important. One piece that I didn't really touch on a whole lot talking about KoBold is their geological team. I mean, I mentioned that they have 65 PhD geoscientists working on this, which is unbelievable. But the person actually running the program for KoBold is a fellow named David Broughton. And David would arguably be the top or one of the top SEDEX copper experts in the world. He did all the development work at Kansanshi, is credited with the discovery of Kamoa-Kakula and all the development work at Kamoa-Kakula for Ivanhoe. And he worked for Ivanhoe for 10 or 12 years. And, we've known David for probably a decade. We've all known him through our careers, but he's been around our project for a long time. And we've wanted to hire him. We've wanted David to come in and run this project because he's the guy. I mean, this is the person you want running your program. By way of the KoBold deal, we get David. So David is running our project at Dumbwa. But not only is David running the program, David's built a team of people that he considers the absolute top people. And they're working under him to develop this. So, I mean, we literally have the geological dream team to be working on this. So, in terms of catalysts, the big ones are starting drilling. So, we're probably 4 to 6 weeks out, give or take. So I would say, by the end of July, we should be rolling with drill rigs. We should be out there drilling. And that is on Dumbwa and on the oxide targets, starting with Kaziba and eventually moving to Mitu down south. So it'll be ongoing drilling for oxides, aggressive ongoing drilling down at Dumbwa. And I think those are the big catalysts. And then, of course, drill results. So, we often get asked, what about reporting? KoBold's a private company and they're running the program. So will you be able to put results out? And the answer to that is yes, we will. So we have an arrangement with KoBold where we'll have the ability to disseminate drill results as we go. So there's going to be lots of drill results, lots of news flow. And then from the oxide drilling, we'll have drill results very quickly because they're reverse circulation holes. We can do that stuff really quickly. We're going to be pumping out results constantly. So, the fall is going to be very newsy, very busy, super exciting, and lots of news flow. So, aggressively going forth, basically the best of both worlds. You have, a program going on for a huge 1 billion ton target at depth. And then at the same time, you have this oxide thing going on that could develop near-term cash flow for us, and happening simultaneously and with results coming left and right. So.
Well, we could talk forever, I think, on this, as there is so much to cover, but that is an excellent final summary. So, Adrian, thank you very much for joining me to tell me about the Midnight Sun story, and good luck with the drilling.
Excellent. Thanks, Ollie. I appreciate it.